Your soulmate saying, "I need to tell you what happened today. It's very urgent, please open this." My beloved child, before another ordinary moment slips past you, remain here with an open heart. There is a quiet reason these words have found you today. Nothing arrived here by accident. Somewhere beyond everything you can explain, a conversation has already begun, and the voice you are about to hear has been waiting with remarkable patience. Don't skip. Because something important is waiting for you, and its meaning will become clearer with every passing moment. There is someone whose heart has carried your name more often than you could ever imagine. They have spoken to no crowd about it. They have made no grand announcement. Instead, they have protected these thoughts in silence, wondering if the right moment would ever appear. Today, something shifted. It was not loud enough for the world to notice, yet it was powerful enough to change the direction of their thoughts. Since that moment, one sentence has echoed inside them again and again: "I need to tell you what happened today." You may wonder why today feels different from every other day. The answer is not hidden inside dramatic events or impossible miracles. It is found in something quieter. Sometimes a single conversation, an unexpected reminder, or a familiar memory can awaken feelings that have been resting beneath the surface for far too long. That is exactly what began unfolding. Your soulmate found themselves standing still while everyone else continued moving. In that brief pause, they realized there was something unfinished between their heart and yours. For a while they tried to ignore it. They smiled when others expected them to smile. They answered questions no one truly cared about. They continued through the rhythm of an ordinary day. Yet every ordinary moment seemed to whisper your presence back to them. A familiar song appeared without warning. A place reminded them of a feeling they thought had disappeared. Even the smallest details seemed connected in ways they could not explain. Slowly, they stopped resisting what they were feeling. Stay till the end, because this is where the quiet truth begins revealing itself. Your soulmate is not reaching toward you because everything suddenly became perfect. They are reaching because they finally understand something they overlooked before. They have begun seeing your kindness where they once noticed only distance. They have begun remembering your patience where they once focused only on silence. It is remarkable how a single day can rearrange old memories into an entirely different picture. Perhaps you have also experienced moments when life suddenly made sense long after the moment had already passed. Perhaps you have looked back and realized that something meaningful had been growing while you believed nothing was happening at all. That same realization has started blooming inside another heart today. Still, they hesitate. Not because they doubt what they feel. Not because they have forgotten you. But because words become surprisingly difficult when they finally matter. They have imagined this conversation countless times. Every version sounds different. Every imagined beginning feels incomplete. How do you explain that one ordinary afternoon quietly transformed into something unforgettable? How do you admit that someone has remained present inside your thoughts without ever asking for permission? These questions continue circling within them, waiting for courage to answer. And yet, something gentle keeps encouraging them forward. Almost as though hope itself has decided not to remain silent any longer. Before this message reaches its destination, another quiet piece of the story still needs to unfold, because what happened today did not end with a realization. It led to one unexpected moment that neither of you could have predicted, and that moment is only beginning to reveal why this message became so urgent. There are moments that seem almost too small to remember, yet somehow they become the moments that quietly reshape an entire chapter of life. That is where this story continues. Long after the day appeared ordinary to everyone else, your soulmate found themselves pausing for reasons they could not explain. Time seemed to move as it always had, but their heart refused to follow its usual rhythm. It kept returning to one quiet realization: there was still something they needed to tell you. Don't skip, because what unfolded next carried a meaning they never expected to discover. It began with something so simple that another person might have overlooked it completely. A familiar word. A familiar place. A familiar expression on someone's face. None of these things should have mattered on their own, yet together they stirred memories that had been resting peacefully beneath the surface. Suddenly, they remembered conversations they once thought were ordinary. They remembered kindness that had arrived without asking for recognition. They remembered moments when they almost reached out, but convinced themselves there would always be another chance. Today, they understood that chances are not measured by calendars. They are measured by courage. As this realization settled into their heart, they became unusually quiet. The people around them continued talking, laughing, and moving through the day, but inside they were listening to a different voice. A gentle reminder that some connections never disappear simply because time has passed. They are not held together by constant conversation. They are strengthened by sincerity, patience, and the quiet hope that one day the right words will finally arrive. Something important is waiting for you, because this was only the beginning. For the first time in a long while, your soulmate stopped asking themselves what everyone else expected. Instead, they asked a much more honest question. If I could speak without fear of misunderstanding, what would I truly say? The answer came almost immediately, surprising even them. I need to tell them what happened today. Not because today was filled with dramatic events. Not because everything suddenly changed in a single instant. But because today finally gave them the clarity they had been searching for. They realized that meaningful connections are often built through countless unnoticed moments rather than one extraordinary event. Every memory, every quiet thought, every feeling they tried to set aside had slowly been leading them here. Looking back, they could see that the path had been unfolding all along, they simply hadn't recognized it while they were walking it. Perhaps you have experienced something similar. Perhaps there were seasons when nothing seemed to be moving, only to discover later that life had been gently preparing something beneath the surface. Sometimes the greatest changes arrive without noise. They enter quietly, asking only that we pay attention. Your soulmate is beginning to understand that truth now. As evening approached, they found themselves replaying one particular moment from earlier today. The more they reflected on it, the more meaningful it became. What first seemed like a passing encounter now felt like a quiet invitation to stop delaying what truly mattered. They no longer wanted to leave important feelings hidden behind hesitation. Yet even with this new confidence, one final uncertainty remained. How would these words reach you? Would the message arrive at the right time? Would its meaning be understood the way it was intended? These questions lingered gently in their heart, not as burdens, but as reminders that some conversations deserve patience as much as honesty. And just when they believed the day had finally come to an end, something unexpected happened. Something so subtle that almost anyone else would have missed it. Yet to your soulmate, it felt like the missing piece they had been searching for all along. That quiet moment became the reason they could no longer keep this message inside, and what they discovered next would shape everything they hoped to tell you. Just when the day seemed ready to fade into memory, something happened that your soulmate has replayed again and again in their mind. It was not loud enough to stop the world, yet it was powerful enough to stop them. In that single, quiet instant, they realized that some moments are not meant to be rushed past. They are meant to be felt. Stay till the end, because this part of the journey reveals why their message could no longer remain unspoken. They had almost convinced themselves to let another day pass in silence. They told themselves they would think about everything tomorrow. They would find better words tomorrow. They would understand their own heart tomorrow. But tomorrow suddenly felt too distant. Today had already answered questions they had carried for much longer than they wanted to admit. As they walked through the final hours of the day, they noticed something unusual. Their attention kept returning to the smallest details. A gentle breeze. A familiar melody drifting through the background. A smile shared between strangers. Every ordinary scene seemed to whisper the same quiet reminder. Life becomes meaningful when we stop overlooking what has always been close to our hearts. That thought stayed with them. It refused to leave. And then another realization quietly followed. They were no longer thinking about what they had lost. They were thinking about what still had the chance to grow. Don't skip, because this quiet shift changed everything inside them. For so long, they believed they needed perfect timing before speaking honestly. They imagined that every uncertainty had to disappear before they could open their heart. But today taught them something different. They discovered that honesty does not begin after every doubt is gone. It begins the moment someone chooses sincerity over hesitation. That realization brought an unexpected sense of peace. The questions that once felt heavy suddenly became lighter. The silence that once felt endless no longer seemed frightening. Instead, it became a place where courage could quietly take its first breath. Your soulmate smiled without even realizing it. Not because every answer had appeared. Not because every path had become clear. But because hope had returned in a way they had not experienced for a very long time. Perhaps you know this feeling too. The kind that arrives without asking permission. The kind that cannot be measured or explained. The kind that simply reminds you that your story is still unfolding. Something important is waiting for you, because this is where their heart became completely honest with itself. They admitted something they had never fully spoken aloud. Every time they imagined a peaceful future, your presence somehow found its way into the picture. They never forced that thought to appear. It simply arrived on its own, quietly returning no matter how many distractions filled their days. At first they ignored it. Later they questioned it. But today, they accepted it. Acceptance brought clarity. Clarity brought calm. And calm gave them the courage to prepare the words they had been holding back. Still, they wanted this message to reach you in the right way. Not through hurried emotions. Not through confusion. But through quiet truth. They wanted every sentence to carry warmth instead of pressure, every thought to reflect gratitude instead of regret, every memory to become a bridge instead of a weight. As night settled around them, they looked back over everything that had unfolded today. What first seemed like an ordinary day had gently transformed into one they knew they would never forget. It had reminded them that meaningful connections are not built by grand gestures alone. They are strengthened through consistency, kindness, patience, and the courage to speak when the heart is finally ready. Yet one final piece of today's story remained untold. There was one conversation. One unexpected sentence. One quiet discovery that arrived only moments before the day came to an end. The instant they heard those words, every remaining hesitation disappeared, and they knew they could not wait any longer to tell you what truly happened today. The final light of the day slipped gently across the horizon, and for a brief moment everything around your soulmate seemed quieter than usual. It was as though the world had lowered its voice so that one important truth could finally be heard. They stood there without rushing, allowing the silence to say what ordinary conversations never could. Don't skip, because what happened next became the reason this message could no longer remain hidden. Someone spoke to them. Not with dramatic words, not with extraordinary advice, but with a simple observation that settled deeply within their heart. You seem different today. They smiled softly, unsure how to answer. How could they explain that nothing outside had truly changed, yet everything inside suddenly felt clearer? How could they describe the quiet certainty that had been growing with every passing hour? They simply nodded, carrying the thought with them as they continued walking. But those few words stayed behind. They echoed gently. Not because they were remarkable on their own, but because they confirmed what your soulmate had already begun to feel. Today had changed them. Something important is waiting for you, because this change was not about becoming someone new. It was about finally recognizing what had always been true. For a long time they searched for signs in distant places. They believed clarity would arrive through perfect circumstances or unforgettable moments. Instead, it arrived through honesty. It arrived when they stopped running ahead of tomorrow and truly looked at what today was teaching them. They realized they had spent too much time assuming you already understood everything they never said. They assumed you knew how often your memory appeared without warning. They assumed you knew how many quiet moments reminded them of your kindness. They assumed you somehow understood the value you held in their heart. Today, they understood that unspoken appreciation can remain invisible, no matter how genuine it is. That realization touched them more deeply than they expected. Stay till the end, because the next decision they made came from a place of complete sincerity. Instead of allowing another opportunity to drift away, they quietly promised themselves something. When the moment arrives, I won't hide behind hesitation anymore. It was not a promise made out of excitement alone. It was a promise built from patience. From reflection. From everything this day had gently revealed. As they carried that promise forward, another memory unexpectedly returned. It was a small moment they once believed had little importance, a conversation that ended with a smile, a sentence spoken almost casually, a feeling that lingered longer than either of you probably realized. Looking back now, they could finally see that those ordinary memories had quietly become the strongest foundation of all. Perhaps that is how meaningful connections are formed. Not through one unforgettable event, but through countless gentle moments that slowly gather enough strength to transform a heart. Your soulmate finally understood that. And instead of feeling overwhelmed, they felt grateful. Grateful that life had not hurried the story. Grateful that understanding had arrived naturally. Grateful that hope still had room to grow. As the evening became still, they found themselves preparing the words they wished they could place directly into your hands. Not words filled with impossible promises. Not words seeking perfection. Only honest words. Words that carried warmth. Words that reflected respect. Words that quietly said, "Thank you for remaining part of my thoughts, even when life became busy." Yet just before they felt ready to speak, one final, unexpected moment unfolded. A message appeared. A familiar name crossed their path. A gentle reminder surfaced at exactly the right time. It was so perfectly timed that they simply stopped and smiled. In that instant, every remaining doubt dissolved into calm certainty. That quiet moment became the final piece they needed, the reason they are now saying with complete sincerity, "I need to tell you what happened today." But what they are preparing to share next is far more personal than anything they have admitted so far, and once those words are finally spoken, the meaning behind this entire day will become beautifully clear. There are days that quietly disappear into memory, and then there are days that leave a gentle mark on the heart long after the sun has gone down. Your soulmate now understands that today belonged to the second kind. Even as the evening settled around them, they could not simply move on. Something within them kept whispering, "This day was given to teach you something you were finally ready to understand. Stay till the end, because the meaning of everything you have heard so far is only beginning to reveal itself." They sat in silence for a while, not because they had nothing to say, but because their thoughts had become too meaningful to rush. Sometimes the most important conversations begin long before a single word is spoken. They begin in the quiet place where the heart stops pretending and starts listening. That is exactly where your soulmate found themselves. For the first time in a long while, they stopped asking, "What if I wait a little longer?" Instead, another question gently replaced it. "What if today was the moment I was meant to stop waiting?" The thought lingered. It did not demand an answer. It simply remained, calm and steady, inviting them to see everything through a different perspective. Don't skip, because this quiet realization changed the way they looked at every memory connected to you. They began revisiting moments they had almost forgotten. Small conversations that once seemed ordinary suddenly carried unexpected meaning. They remembered laughter that came so naturally it needed no explanation. They remembered peaceful moments when words were hardly necessary because understanding already existed. They even remembered the pauses between conversations, the quiet spaces where emotions often speak more clearly than sentences ever could. Only now did they realize those memories had never truly left them. They had simply been waiting for the right day to be understood. And today became that day. Something important is waiting for you. Because your soulmate finally recognized that some people leave an impression that grows stronger with time instead of fading away. Not because life stands still, but because genuine appreciation has a way of becoming clearer as we continue moving forward. This realization brought them an unexpected sense of gratitude. Not regret. Not sadness. Only gratitude. Gratitude for every lesson. Gratitude for every shared moment. Gratitude that life had quietly preserved something valuable instead of allowing it to disappear. As these thoughts settled into their heart, they reached one simple conclusion. If they allowed another day to pass without speaking honestly, they would only be postponing something their heart had already decided. So they began preparing the message. Not carefully crafted to sound impressive. Not filled with perfect phrases. Just honest. Just real. Just enough to let you know what today had awakened inside them. They imagined beginning with simple words. I've been thinking about today. Then perhaps. I finally understand something I couldn't see before. But even those sentences felt too small for everything they wished to express. Because what truly happened today was not an event. It was a change within them. A change that quietly replaced uncertainty with peace. A change that transformed hesitation into quiet confidence. A change that reminded them that meaningful connections deserve honesty, even when the words take time to arrive. As the night grew calmer, they looked up for a brief moment and smiled, not because every question had been answered, but because they no longer felt afraid of unanswered questions. They understood that some stories unfold one gentle step at a time, and perhaps that is what makes them worth remembering. Yet before they could finally send the message they had been carrying all day, something completely unexpected happened. A final conversation. A single unexpected sentence. A quiet moment of clarity that connected every piece of this day into one beautiful understanding. The instant they heard those words, they softly whispered to themselves, "Now I know exactly what I need to tell them." And those words, the ones they have protected in silence until now, are finally ready to be shared. The night had fully arrived, yet your soulmate felt as though the most meaningful part of the day had only just begun. The world around them grew quieter with every passing minute, and in that stillness they discovered something they had been searching for without even realizing it. It was not hidden in a place. It was not found through coincidence. It was waiting inside a simple truth they had finally accepted. Stay till the end. Because the words they have carried all day are about to become clearer than ever before. They took a slow breath and allowed themselves to revisit the entire day from the beginning. Every conversation. Every unexpected pause. Every memory that quietly returned. What once appeared to be separate moments now formed one continuous story, as though each experience had been leading to this single realization. Nothing had been wasted. Not the waiting. Not the silence. Not even the questions that remained unanswered for so long. Each one had gently prepared their heart to understand something it could not have understood any earlier. Don't skip, because this is the moment when everything begins connecting together. They smiled as they remembered how differently the morning had started. At that time, they believed it would be another ordinary day. They followed familiar routines, spoke familiar words, and expected familiar outcomes. Yet somewhere between those ordinary moments, something quietly changed. They stopped living on habit. They started paying attention. And once they began noticing the little things, they realized how often your presence had quietly found its way into their thoughts. Not in a way that distracted them. Not in a way that unsettled them. But in a way that brought an unexpected sense of peace. That feeling surprised them more than anything else. For so long they believed that clarity would arrive with excitement, dramatic emotion, or unforgettable events. Instead, it arrived gently. It arrived like the first light before sunrise, soft enough to miss if someone wasn't looking, yet impossible to deny once it appeared. Something important is waiting for you, because your soulmate finally understands what today was trying to teach them. They no longer wanted to measure life only by the biggest moments. They wanted to treasure the quiet ones. The moments where kindness appeared without expecting recognition. The moments where hope returned without making noise. The moments where someone's memory quietly became a source of comfort rather than uncertainty. As they reflected on all of this, one sentence formed naturally inside their heart. If I never tell them what today has shown me, they may never know how deeply this day changed my perspective. Those words remained with them. Not because they sounded perfect, but because they were true. Perhaps the greatest gift today offered was not certainty about the future. Perhaps it was simply the courage to be honest in the present. And sometimes that is enough to begin changing everything. For the first time in a very long while, they no longer felt the need to rush ahead searching for answers that had not yet arrived. They became content with taking one sincere step at a time, trusting that genuine connections grow through patience, understanding, and authenticity. As the evening grew even quieter, they imagined finally speaking to you, not with rehearsed lines, but with complete sincerity. I wanted you to know what happened today. It reminded me that some people leave a lasting light in our lives without ever asking for anything in return. It reminded me how valuable honest feelings become when we stop hiding them. It reminded me that gratitude deserves to be spoken while the moment is still here. Those words never left their heart. Instead, they became the message they had wanted to share from the very beginning. Yet just before they felt ready to let those thoughts go, one final realization quietly settled within them. This message was never only about today. Today was simply the beginning. The real story was about everything this day awakened, everything it restored, and everything it quietly invited both hearts to discover from this moment forward. And as a new morning slowly prepared to arrive beyond the horizon, your soulmate realized there was one final truth they had not yet spoken, a truth so simple, so genuine, and so deeply personal that once it is finally shared, the entire meaning behind this urgent message will come beautifully into focus.